This is the Past Lives Podcast, episode 88. I'm your host, Simon Bown. My mission here at the Past Lives Podcast is to investigate evidence that demonstrates survival of the human soul. We will look at past life memories, near-death experiences, spirit communication, and other incredible phenomena. There is a Past Lives Podcast Patreon campaign. If you sign up to the $2 tier, you will get a bonus episode every month. Members of the $5 tier get a bonus episode every week, the occasional extended versions of the free 1-hour episodes, and of course the back catalogue. And I want to say hello to everyone that has signed up to Patreon and everyone that has made a donation to the podcast. You can become a patron by going to patreon.com/pastlivespodcast or click on the button on my homepage at pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. There is a Past Lives Podcast Facebook group, and if you'd like to join, you'd be very welcome. And I am on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to find me, my Twitter name is @SimonG.Bown. My guest this week is Pieter Elsen. We talk about his book, When Souls Awaken, Real-Life Accounts of Past Life and Life Between Lives Regressions. Pieter was born in Holland and has lived in 5 different countries on 3 different continents. He was a Vedic monk for 21 years, of which 11 were spent in India. While there, he studied extensively the deep and spiritual philosophy of the East. He uses this experience and knowledge as a therapist and life coach counsellor, integrating the Western and Eastern schools of thought. He is licensed by the Michael Newton Institute of Life Between Lives Regression. In 2014, Pieter attained his PhD, specialising in transpersonal and spiritual counselling. Pieter's current focus is on past life and life between lives regression sessions. Hi Pieter, thank you very much for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Thank you, I'm so happy to be here.
I wanted to invite you on because I saw your book and I've read, it's called When Souls Awaken, Real-Life Accounts of Past Life and Life Between Lives Regressions. But what I want to ask you is, have you always been interested in this sort of thing ever since you were small?
Yes, because I remember a lot of my past lives. I used to have vivid dreams as a kid, and it was always part of my thought patterns. And this idea, the notion of karma, that there is action and reaction, that we are here because of a momentum we've built up in our lives, it kind of came to me as a kid. I used to toss and turn in my bed every night and thinking, why am I here? Why in this place with these people in this country? And maybe the echo of my past lives was playing down in my subconscious. And then I started having these dreams, very vivid dreams of past lives that later on, in so many ways, direct and indirect, was confirmed that I actually had been there. So it was it was just part of natural to me.
You had some kind of verification of the past lives, did you?
Well, verification in not in some scientific way, but very much in a way that I recognized certain places. I had great unexplainable affinity for certain places, and the combination of certain of these things with my own past life memories of these things, how are you ever going to prove that to other people, was very clear to me, so it was just and then the philosophical implications. In psychology, we say I'm the product of my parents, my environment, and my body. But to me, it also was more logical that, yes, okay, I have no argument with that. But how come I'm born with these parents, with this body and in this environment? Is there a cause? Is there a momentum? Is there a timeline that I don't see, but the results of which I experience every day, momentum of certain tendencies within me that cannot be explained by just this life? So I was always thinking about this stuff, and then I had my own personal experiences along with it. So it became just the way I thought, the way I lived, and the way I reasoned.
There is that thing where things seem to come through from previous lives. Sometimes it's quite obvious, I suppose. If you see child prodigies, you can just amazing musicians and they're so young, but it must have come from somewhere else.
Yes, to me it's more logical than to think it's just hereditary. I mean, people always say, "Oh, I'm too scientific for that," but how is that scientific? The same children coming from the same parents with the same gene pool would display characteristics and tendencies that are unexplainable by their lineage. And so why could not there be a timeline or a causality that is not necessarily visible or tangible, but inferentially we could definitely say, well, that makes more sense than to claim otherwise. You can't argue with those that are against it, and I have no argument. But for me personally, and for a lot of people I work with and a lot of people I hang out with, they all tend to agree. So yeah, the whole point here is I'm never having an argument. I never try to convince anybody because there's no point. But it's really more important for those that are either on the fence or that also think this way to kind of feel that, hey, there's a lot of us that think this way, and it can really help you to understand why things happen the way they happen and why I am the person that I am.
Now, the thing that I like about your book is all the different sessions that are in there and all the transcripts of the actual conversations that you had. Could you give us an overview of the book and what was your thought pattern to how to bring it together?
Well, I didn't want it just to be a book about cases. Like you read a lot of these books and they just are stuffed with one case after another. Although I have a lot of cases because people love to read those and they really are testimonies of what actually happened, because in my book they're verbatim accounts of what actually happened during the session. They're really not edited at all. That is important as a frame of reference, is like this is what happened. But what I really wanted to accomplish in this book was, as you can see, it's divided in 3 sections, and section 1 is really kind of an introduction to some concept. What my main thought behind this was that even if you go in standard past life regression, or in this case life between life regression, so far what I have read, there is not much testimony of people that have gone beyond even the realms of the afterlife as we know it in these books. Like, okay, there's a guide here, or there's a council of elders or wise ones that help us to choose lives. That is already, groundbreaking enough, what Michael Newton did. But what I had discovered with a lot of clients, that there are stages of consciousness even beyond that, which are in line with quantum physics, in line with Vedic thought, Buddhist thought, and scientific thought. And what I found important is to highlight this kind of thinking. That is, how can we explain science in terms of quantum physics, that everything is one, everything is energy? How can we explain that in relation to the experiences some people have of an afterlife, like near-death experiences, that there's a heaven-like atmosphere? There is a heaven-like atmosphere. There's guides, there's realms out there, while quantum physics will tell us there's just energy. So in my book, I've tried to explain how they can coexist, these different realms, these different levels of possibility. And that was my main intention, to bridge that gap where the intellect may have conflict with accepting some of the Christian Judaic projections of the afterlife, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And different cases I have tried to illustrate and choose that highlight that process, that idea.
In the introduction, you say this is not going to be a book that attempts to convince you of the truth of reincarnation. We are beyond that. So is that your feeling that this is proven? Let's forget trying to prove it because we can accept it's real. Let's get on with that.
Well, what I try to say by that is that a lot of even the great ones, Brian Weiss, even Michael Newton, they lived in a different time. They were the pioneers, the groundbreakers. And they came from a purely academic background. So the way they set up their books, it was almost like an attempt to prove it. Like, here we are, highly educated, we are qualified. Let me show you what we have experienced consistently to convince you that it is possible that such a phenomenon as past lives and life between lives could exist. So that was their task. They were the groundbreakers, like Freud was the groundbreaker in modern psychology. But we are now post Michael Newton, post Brian Weiss. Like, they have done that groundbreaking work. And I didn't feel like, let me now go and try to also prove that. This book was more intent for those that, I meet so many people. Yeah, I've read everything there is about this topic. And, like, they don't want to be hearing again, trying somebody to convince them because they are already convinced. And there's going to be always a certain amount of people that are not interested. And that's fine. I have no argument and no intention of trying to disrespect their opinions. But for those that already have been introduced to this topic, which now for the last, I would say, half a decade, half a century, we have been now consistently exposed to this kind of thinking. For those people, they want something more. And what is that next step? And my book is really trying to go into that next step. Okay, now we've accepted this, and now how can you take this to another level? Are there people that have had different kinds of experiences within this framework of thought? And so that's why I said what I said in the introduction.
There's something else really close to the beginning of the book which I found fascinating, is when you say that you consciously remember the time before you took this birth, where you were standing looking down at life, accompanied by your guide, eager to start this life. Could you describe that? Where you were, what you were seeing and feeling?
Yeah, I was as a kid. I used to have, I just used to have this memories that I was, as a young kid, I was really excited, remembering how excited I was to take this birth. And I was with a guide there, choosing this birth and all the challenges I was going to take. And I don't know if you read my bio. Well, I guess since you read the book, you can see that I've kind of had a life all over the world and did all kinds of things. And the guide asked me, "Are you sure you want to take up this many challenges? I mean, that's a little bit too much." And I was so enthusiastic. No, I want to do it. I can do it. I can take on all these different challenges in this life. I want to do it all in this life. And so he was smiling at me and he said, "Okay, well, let's go for it. I wish you luck." And so I just had that memory as a kid. And whether I made it up or not, to me, it was very real because I still, even to this very day, I remember this. And so it was just very fascinating. And so it just kind of fit in with all the other experiences I've had and the way I've been thinking about life.
And you went on to spend 21 years living as a monk, and 11 of those years in India. So could you give us an idea of what that was like over that time?
Well, I was not a Christian monk. It was more a Vedic monk, very much philosophically similar to what the Dalai Lama and the Buddhists have as a philosophy. But then I was more in a traditional, very very traditional Eastern Indian way of monkhood, sannyas, they used to call it, a sannyasi. And I was very interested in all of this, like we were sharing earlier, from my childhood. My mom really was kind of a yogi, interested in Eastern thought and yoga in the early 70s. And so at home we had all the books of philosophy, and we would go out, me and her, to visit the different saints and sages that would visit Holland and Belgium and France and Germany. That was kind of the range of our travels. And so after college, I studied industrial design, product design. I did that for 5 years in college. And then after I finished, I was like, I worked for a bit in that field. And though I liked it in so many ways, my heart was really in the philosophy. I wanted to live it. And so I ended up joining a spiritual center near Paris. And it was an Indian saint that lived there. He had a big center there. And initially, I wasn't really intending to be a monk per se. I was just looking for a lifestyle that was congruent with my inner state of being. The goal was not to be a monk per se. Although I was living that way, I didn't know it at the time, but everything in my life I had prepared to kind of be that way. And I just wanted to be around this kind of people that had these kind of thoughts. After I came from college, I was drafted for a while in the army, and that was just like the opposite of everything I felt. And that only accentuated my desire to live differently and think differently. And so I joined there, and I was there for 4 years, and the old sage died, and I was given the opportunity to go to some sort of seminary in Calcutta on the bank of the Ganges, a training center, for 2 years. And I went there, and it was fascinating. It was tough physically, because, the city of joy, it's a tough place, Calcutta. The climate, the weather, particularly for a northwestern European body, it's not conducive for our physiology, but our health. But I was mentally and spiritually very satisfied. I loved being there, just the adventure. I was a young guy, I had nowhere else to go. I ended up staying 11 years, different parts of India, the last few years in South India, and it was fascinating just to learn a different way of thinking, a different way of living, hanging out with saints and meditating on the bank of the Ganges in the Himalayas and traveling a lot. And it was just a very fascinating life. And I was eventually transferred to the United States, to California, to be more like a minister and give classes on Eastern philosophy and lectures and so on. And I did that for 6 years more. And then eventually, the organized side of it, I kind of became a little tired of it. Not the life itself. Everything I believed in, I still believe in, but it is just the way I wanted to express that was differently. So eventually I left that organized side of it and just kind of went on my own in that quest. It's kind of my journey as a monk.
And then you moved on into hypnosis. So do you do hypnotherapy and cover all sorts of things that hypnotherapy does, or do you just specialize in the regressions?
I've done the first 9 years. I just did the therapy side. So I dealt with smoking and stress, anxiety, and so a lot of relationship issues, and helping people reshape their subconscious belief system and reshape their habits, as traditional hypnotherapy will do. I've seen thousands of people during those years, but my heart has always been in the regression work, and so I eventually made the shift. And also, you need experience to do the regression, and particularly the life between life regression. You need experience. Some people think they can just start doing that when they just graduate from doing hypnosis, but I'm glad that I had the experience under my belt, because these are generally intense sessions. You have to have a little maturity and a little age to you to carry that kind of sessions properly. And so I did it kind of the traditional way. I just did a lot of regular grunt work as a regular therapist, and then I specialized slowly into the regression work, and now that's all I do. 99%. I still, once in a while, I do something else. Still, people come to me for other stuff in my local office here in North Carolina. But my heart is not really in that, and I just like to do the regression work.
One thing you say in the book about the life between lives regression is that it's still very much based on a Christian world of heaven, and that the afterlife is some kind of a well-organized Earth-like extension. But do you feel it's a lot different to that?
Well, I think there's more to that, and you have to put it in the right context. I think initially when Michael Newton introduced this idea that it was a well-organized afterlife with different, stations of, body selection and different stations of, where you can meet the guides and the councils and your soul group. I've never found evidence that that's not true. However, I think there's more around that. And I believe there are different levels of consciousness to which one can ascend. So I thought it was important to add that to it. Michael Newton, we used to have conversations with him on a forum before he died. And there was actually questions asked to him about this. And he said, yes, there is so much more. Things have so much evolved. But in his books, I didn't think he went there. For so many reasons, because like I said, he was a groundbreaker, and that's the initial thing that he wanted to present, that there's more here. There's more than just what meets the eye. But I still think it was also, at the time that he presented this work and these thoughts, it was still very much a Christian world in which he presented it. Now it's different. Particularly in the United States, there's so much immigration that's taking place. Well, in England too. I mean, look at the fight with the Brexit and everything. People have difficulty. They are being confronted by the reality. There's different kinds of people with different kinds of thoughts and different kind of cultures. And on a philosophical level, that also is true, right? So the Christian worldview that there is just a heaven and that we're going to go there and everything is going to be okay, is that the only way to think about the afterlife? What about quantum physics? What about, Einstein trying to define the unified field theory, that there is only really one energetic reality? And the Vedic thought, the Eastern thought, the Buddhists, they think that way. The Sunya, the Nirvana, the fullness of existence is similar to this quantum physics reality of oneness. And so if you think that, well, the afterlife and my reality is that heaven, then how does that scientific view come in? How can they coexist, these thoughts? And so my feeling is that, my experience is, because the experience of my clients is that as you die, you still bring with you the conditioning of all your lives, not just this life, the lives you have lived before. We call it the subtle body or the causal body. And this is like a sheath that is wrapped around you with all the impressions of your past. It's like looking through reality, looking at reality through a lens. And that lens is the conditioning. That lens is the conditioning of all your past. Now, to the degree that density, that conditioning is dense, to that degree, that's what you're going to be seeing even in the afterlife. And that's why people experience all the things they do in that heaven-like afterlife. But there have been plenty of accounts of great saints and sages, even here while they were alive, that felt the oneness with all existence. They have become awakened. They have become awakened to the fact that you and I and all things energetically are one. And this is where science and spiritual realization meet. And so I've seen in the afterlife many people going into these superconscious states, and there were no guides, there were no body selection rooms, there were no councils, there were just an ecstatic state of oneness that they experienced when they disassociated themselves from their conditioning. And so you see, that's why my book is about that. Like, wow, can I experience that oneness of existence as the greatest of scientists have described reality to be? And they have experienced that. Many, many, many people in my sessions have experienced that oneness while they were in the session. And you see, so they both, the reality as described in Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls of Michael Newton, that is also true, but it is true in a different way, when we are still very much condensed and densed, attached to our conditioning. And that's the reality you're going to be seeing at that level. It's like a different level. Does it make sense?
Yes, yeah, because I found that one of the chapters in there, you have, I think it's two ladies who go into this really expanded kind of consciousness when they go into the regression. And I did find that fascinating, and that in the transcript, some of the things they were talking about seemed very profound and very wise.
Yes, absolutely amazing, yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Some of these people, they have experienced cosmic states of oneness while they were going through this experience. And my point is that there have been many philosophical systems that support this view as well. And Dalai Lama says you cannot really believe in spirituality without understanding quantum physics. That is a statement of the Dalai Lama. In reality, that cosmic consciousness, the highest levels of who we can be, alive or dead, is similar to the experience of reality in the greatest way of looking at this universe scientifically, that there is only one reality. To a lot of people, this may sound like this is going a little far, but is it really? Because look at science. Science is proving that there is no matter. Matter doesn't exist. There is no object. It doesn't exist. We see it because of the limitations of our senses, but scientifically it's not there. Our bodies as separate beings don't really exist, right? From the highest scientific standpoint. So spiritually, that experience can be had also. And in my book, there are several people that describe these realizations while they were in this highest level of consciousness.
And also you mentioned in the book that you were doing a meditation with a guru in Amsterdam. You experienced a light consciousness expanding infinitely in all directions.
Yes. That was exactly that experience that I had myself as well, where my soul basically left my body and my mind, and I was like a drop that was in the oceans. As they say, presence, center everywhere, circumference nowhere. It's like if you put a drop in the ocean, it becomes one with the ocean. But just before it becomes one, it still has a sense of separation where you're about to merge into that ocean, but you're of the nature of that ocean, being a drop of water. And so that's the kind of experience I had. And a lot of my clients had that as well. And so these are just incredible experiences where you realize, God, there is more than meets the eye,
I have linked up with Audible so that you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. Many of the guests that have been on the Past Life podcast have books available on Audible, including Dr. Eben Alexander, Dr. Bani Sartori and Wendy Rose Williams. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Past Lives podcast. So do you see consistent sort of themes that repeat themselves across all the sessions? There's a consistency of what people see.
Yes, there is. If in the second session of my book, I really address that question. where we talk about purpose, right? Like, why am I here? What am I supposed to do? What happens is people come to me with a list of questions, and then I ask those questions on their behalf when we go into that higher level of consciousness. And so we could say that consistent theme is in two ways. One is, what am I supposed to do here on this earth now? And then the second tier is, well, who am I really? If I'm taking multiple births, what is the nature of my reality? What is the nature of my true self? I want to experience what I really am if I'm not Johnny in this birth or Mary in this birth, right? Because the idea of reincarnation implies that I am just a passerby. I'm passing through this birth and then I die. So, but my true self remains taking up another body. So why? What guides that? That is one question. Who am I? The other question is, well, I'm here. I'm not dead. I want to make the best out of my life, and I want to be happy. I mean, the idea of the guides that guide us, what I have seen, is not like, oh, live your life in such a way that when you die, you're going to go there and do this. No, they're very concerned about being happy now and coming to a sense of success, what a successful life is now. And so that is definitely one big theme where we are being guided to live a successful life. And these instructions as to what a successful life looks like is really the second section in my book, the triangle, as I describe it. And the triangle of three important points that need to be balanced. The idea of love, that we need to come to a state of love with others and within ourselves. The idea of spirituality, that we have a guiding philosophy in life. And the idea of safety and security, that we need to take care of our material situation as well and not be codependent on anybody. And that the balance of these three elements is what will help us come to a state of mind, live a certain way that will allow for the maximum amount of happiness and peace in this life. And then the synergy of that will then allow us to ascend into higher levels of consciousness where we can ask the next question. Who am I and what is the true purpose of my being? Why am I in this birth? What is my true destiny and what is my true identity? What can I, if I would be an awakened being living here right now, what would reality look like? What would it feel like? The question really is, what is the true potential of a human being in an awakened state of consciousness? What would I experience? How would I feel? And when people go through these experiences, some of these people having these ecstatic experiences during these regressions, it tells us what the potential is. That, God, I could feel this blissful all the time. I could feel so connected with others and with the divine all the time. I don't have to die for that. I have to live that now. And so if you ask me what is the main consistent theme, is that these guides and these higher beings, they want us to experience that here and now. And instead of creating separation and hate and division, that if we could learn that we are all of that nature, that we could learn to become one instead of separated.
So you suggest in your book that everybody, I suppose most of the people that come to you for a past life regression or life between lives is guided there, that they don't come to your office randomly, that there is some guidance from somewhere.
Yeah, that is just my personal experience. They're guided in two ways. One in the most direct way, that I believe everybody has their personal guides with them that take care of them. So they arrange certain things, certain people to meet certain circumstances to go to. But then we're also guided internally by, you can only come to this kind of work if you're really ready for it. I mean, there's so many people that have never thought about this. They're not interested in it, and so they wouldn't be coming. They wouldn't be guided to come to you. So in the very common sense approach that if somebody is not interested, they will not be guided to you, right? So it's a meeting of frequencies. It's a meeting of frequencies. If I'm open to receiving people in my office who are interested in that, I have an open frequency, and whoever is, ready to tune into that frequency, then they will find you. And that is basically the concept. It's with all things. I mean, if somebody's looking for a banker who's vibrating that banking frequency and they're in need of that banker, they will find it.
In the times that I've gone to have a past life regression, which can be years apart, I get a certain feeling in the back of my mind, a certain thing that makes me feel like, I should do this thing again. And then that feeling gets stronger and stronger. It's a kind of nagging thing saying, you've got to go and do this again. And I wonder where that comes from.
Yeah, I mean, it's your inner nature trying to find direction, right? I mean, we are so occupied in our lives doing stuff and surviving, but sometimes we don't take the time to evaluate or reevaluate, like, well, where am I really going, right? We are not paying attention to the grand scheme of things as much as we could. And sometimes I think the higher self inside of us is crying out, like, listen to me, don't be so occupied with the superficial surface way of living and just surviving and just having fun, and think about what is important. And I think we are all internally, at the end of the day, guided from within to evolve and to seek for higher ways and higher forms of self-expression. And that nudge, I think, and I think that nudge works in everybody differently. I mean, I'm just doing this kind of work, but there's other people doing so many other different ways of trying to express their own divinity. And I'm a firm believer that there are so many ways and so many paths that lead us, right? I just happen to do this kind of work, and it's just one of the many ways.
The title of Chapter 8 I found quite interesting, and I was hoping you could sort of go over this for us. You called it The Higher Purpose of Grief and Loss.
Yes. The idea is here that if you look at life in the way that we're here to come to this awakened consciousness, right? I mean, that is just then a belief or a concept that we then that kind of that we presuppose that this is why we're here. And if you look at grief and loss in a that way, then this lady in this chapter, she's a very fascinating soul. As a matter of fact, I will be seeing her next month again. And she came to me initially with this tremendous pain and of the loss of her loved one, and who she was just like a soulmate. And so she couldn't see beyond that. She couldn't look at life without him. And it was heartbreaking. And so we went into the session, and then during the session, she started to experience her own self. We went to a past life where she had gone through other forms of loss, where she was, we went back. It's always interesting when we go to a past life and, somebody's struggling with a certain theme, a certain issue, that often the past life that we're going to see is directly connected to the issue that we're dealing with. We have lived many lives. I mean, to which life would we go back? It's never random. It is always in tune with what is it you need to see right now. And there she saw herself going through a similar loss. And in this life, there was another loss. And then we went from the past life to the life between life, where we met a guide. And the guide told her, showed her, listen, you are your own beautiful being. You are your own self. And you've come now to a state in your evolution where the loss that you have experienced was here to guide you, to help you, to look for something higher. You're trying to look for your happiness only in this world, but you're forgetting that you are yourself also a divine being. You are a soul that is an eternal traveler, and you need to realize your own strength, your own potential, your own light. And so the grief that you have experienced was there to help you come to us, to help you wake up to the beauty and strength of your own being. Now, from here onwards, you don't have to go through that loss again. You have learned your lesson. Because of that grief, you have gone through the search, the spiritual search, finding who am I, why is this all happening to me? And so all these successive lives of grief that she went through have helped her wake up and not be so conditioned by the prevalent belief systems that are conditioning us. And so, because she tried everywhere, she went to this church, she went here, she went there, this group and that, and nothing helped. Nothing helped, alleviate her grief. And so she started looking at different ways. She started to find her own spiritual connection. She started to meditate. And there only she started to form a relationship with the divine. Now, during our session, we kind of broke through where she actually connected directly to that source. And that was a revelation to her. And then it was being told to her, like, listen, that grief has fulfilled its purpose. You're here with us now, and now you know how amazing you are. And in your further evolution from here onwards, if there are however many lives there may be for you in store, your connection with us has been established now. Now that grief is not necessary anymore. It was a wake-up call for you to look beyond and to look deeper. And it doesn't mean that, she's still longing for her loved one. She is. And, in maybe another life or in the life between lives, she will meet him again. But that is secondary to the purpose, what was behind it. And so you look at grief that way, then it changes the nature of grief. Then suddenly you realize, there is a purpose behind it. And I don't have to feel so lost.
You talk about how there are blocks at 3 levels, the body, the mind, and then you say the karmic waves that keep crashing the shores of our conscious mind.
Yes.
What are the karmic waves?
Well, they exist in different levels. I mean, there is, of course, the subconscious mind, right, where the waves of the conditioning that has taken place, they inhibit us from truly, freely experiencing our human potential. I mean, the whole concept of hypnotherapy is based on this, right? I mean, we have certain scripts that we run in our subconscious mind that inhibit us. For example, I used to do for about 10 years or so this regular hypnosis, and I used to work a lot with people that would come to me and they would say, I want to make more money. Can you help me? And we actually can, because the subconscious mind has accepted a certain belief system of what I'm worth. We actually have a number in our subconscious mind as to how much I think I can earn. And that number is determined by the way you've been brought up, your parents, your environment, the experiences you had in your childhood regarding the limitations of your body and your brain. And they have shaped a subconscious number in your mind, like this is what I'm worth in relation to others. But this is a highly subjective interpretation that is not necessarily an accurate number. And particularly numbers, they are shaped when we are really young. The first 8 years of our lives, we tend to be very open, and we adapt these childlike belief systems. And then later on, as we develop, these belief systems linger even when we're older. And so these are some of these waves that exist in the subconscious mind. But that is just this life. What if we accept the idea that there are many lives? And so these belief systems, these shapes, these conditioning experiences, they all linger in that subconscious mind. And they're like a frequency that we emit. And they are also standing in the way in between the experience of connecting to the true nature of my being. If I am a soul, then how come I don't experience that? I experience now I'm Pieter, for example, but I not necessarily at this very moment experience I'm a divine soul. But yet I am both at the same time. How come I don't? And it's because of these latent tendencies of all these belief systems in my subconscious mind that stand like a layer between my soul and myself. My current form of Pieter versus my divine identity of who I am. And so the task at hand is to clean out the subconscious mind, to re-evaluate these belief systems and basically thin out. It's like a mirror that is full of fog. And I cannot see my own self reflected in the mirror because the fog, the condensation is on the mirror. Now the condensation are all these mind waves of all the impressions I've gathered in this life and in other lives. And so the moment I learn to clean up this mirror, what do I see? I start my true self reflected back at me. And during regression work, we kind of help people, decondition themselves momentarily to give them the strength and the personal experience that, wow, this is actually possible to do this.
If we are all souls, and when we originally created in some kind of perfection, how come we go on a karmic journey where you could say that perfection is tarnished?
Yeah, well, all the great philosophies in the world have been trying to answer this question. It's really hard as to answer why. I mean, there are great philosophical works about it. And this is a topic I've studied for many years. And in the Eastern philosophy, they do have certain ways of answering it, but they're so abstract and so high that it almost doesn't make sense to even go there. What we do know is that we are at the moment not experiencing the divine. So I always when somebody asks me this question, I always redirect them and say, well, we can ask ourselves, well, why did all of this happen, or how did it all start? But to me, the question now more important is, how can I go back to it? That's being more practical, because at the end of the day, I don't really know, and I don't know if anybody really knows, though there are lofty theories that may explain that. For me now, and for many others, I think the question is, what is my potential? What can I experience? It's a lame answer, I know, but that's all I got.
Okay.
So
that leads into karma, and I was wondering what you would call karma. How would you describe it?
Well, karma is, cause and effect. That karma is a force set in motion of which we are experiencing the results right now, but also forces that we are setting in motion and that we may be experiencing later. They say there are many forms of karma, some that cannot be changed so easily, like our body right now, which is a form of karma. Like to say the arrow has been shot, right? In a past life, we shot an arrow and it landed as this body. Like something has been set in motion, so many forces in our evolution that made us then live this particular life because of all the tremendous momentum that has taken place before. And so that's an arrow that cannot be retracted once it's been shot. But then there's other forms of karma that we do change, that we do have the freedom to change. And that is our thoughts, that is our frequency, our belief systems, that there is a way to become more conscious of the way we can shape our freedom, we can shape our future. And that we are not passive standers by just randomly going through life after life, but that the idea of becoming more conscious will allow us that choice. Idea, if you read, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. Why is this so important, the power of now? Because if I just stand still and not be moving unconsciously through life, and if I stand still now, not only can I enjoy now, but I have time to reflect. Like, can I change the way I think? Do I have a choice to go left or right? Do I have a choice to eat this item or that item? Do I have a choice to say this or that to that person? Do I have a choice to act angrily or lovingly? So that power of now, to be still now, allows me to shape and redirect the arrows I shoot out into the future. So yes, there is an element of karma that has been already taken place, which is our current situation. But then I have the power to shape that into the future and to determine where that arrow is going to land next time. And so now, if the karma is real dense, then that same karma would inhibit us from even having these thoughts, because we would be the product of all this conditioning and we wouldn't even be able to have elevated thoughts. But as over lifetimes, that karma gets thinner and thinner. I evolve, I learn. Then more and more am I becoming conscious. More and more am I becoming a participant in my thoughts. Like a dog is not sitting down and having a thought like, shall I poop here or there? Like they just go, right?
Yeah.
But we do. Now this can go infinitely further and further. I can become more and more a participant in what I do and how I shape my body, how I shape my thoughts, how I shape my awareness. And so the more awake we are, the more that karma, we become a participant. We don't become a passive standby. And that, I believe, is the purpose of reincarnation, that we become more and more participants in shaping our planet, our culture, our environment, our country, our own selves. So an enlightened consciousness, an enlightened society, and an enlightened group of people. Imagine what they could do if they would all stand still and say, hey, is this really what we want?
Do you find that your clients sometimes have a huge kind of paradigm shift, that this is a spiritually transformative experience to go through a regression?
Yes, it is. Because they momentarily step out of that karmic loop, so to speak. I mean, if you pick up where I just left at, this karma, then a paradigm shift is really when suddenly you realize I do have a choice, or suddenly you realize I am different than the conditioning that I've so identified with. Einstein says you cannot solve a problem with the same kind of thinking that caused the problem. And so when I think I'm just Pieter and I'm in this body and in this place, then I think that's all I am. That's the range of my reality, right? But if suddenly, let's say I suddenly step out of that, I have an experience where I suddenly see that I've lived many lives, and that this is one of them, and that my home is not even this body, it's not even this country, I'm not even male, I'm just an infinite being. How would it change the way let's say you have such an experience, and then later on you come back into your body, are you going to be thinking the same way? No, you're going to be thinking differently. You're going to be dealing with fear differently. You're going to be dealing with insecurity differently, because you realize, God, I am so much more. And so even the experience, even once, to just go out of your conditioning has huge psychological implications.
Have you had many experiences of your own throughout your life? I was talking to a lady called Yvonne Caisson recently for the podcast, and she's written a book about spiritually transformative experiences. And she says that once you have one, you can have others, but they're not always the same thing. They can be all sorts of things.
Yes, I mean, I whole my life I spent meditating and doing this kind of things. And so, yes, I mean, you have several big ones, and then you may have some smaller experiences, but they all remind you of the fact that there is more, and that you're on a journey that is eternal, and that your true home is that ocean of consciousness. And all these experiences have been reminders for me to place my attention there where it's important, and to design a lifestyle for myself that is conducive to that realization. And so do I had a lot of experiences? Yes, but experiences are, you can look at them. Yes, I had the traditional spiritual experiences and so on and so on. But as I grow older, my experiences are also very subtle in a way that all of us can have an awakened awareness where you're not having some dramatic experience, but you're just more consciously aware of what it is that you're doing and where it is that you're going, and that you're conscious at every moment of your own higher nature and of the higher nature of others. And you live your life in such a way that you never lose that connection. I think that is the best realization. The spiritual experience doesn't have to be some grandiose event. Yeah, that is great. In the beginning, you may have those, but eventually, the experience you want to have is to be in a gentle flow of ever awakened awareness, where you are always aware, where you're always happy, where you always feel in the flow, and where you feel always connected in so many ways. And you're connected with all things, not some ethereal things, but connected to my cat, to my dog, to my neighbor, to my friends, connected to the joy that exists here in as the fall weather takes place. Sometimes we make that experience so far out of us, we seek it so far out of us, but if I can live it here now, that is valuable. I write in my book, you don't have to die for that, right? The whole point of the enlightened sages, look at St. Francis of Assisi, if you read his life, beautiful movie, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, I don't know if you've seen it. He's one with all people. He loves everybody. To me, that's the ideal. The ideal is I don't need to die to have that. I want to have that experience here, now. And what is it that I need to do to find that awakening, that love, that happiness with all people around me here now? To me, that is the goal. That is the real spiritual experience. I'm not seeking for something just after death. However, ironically, that's the work I do. Life between life, past life, regression. But the great lesson I have learned is that, and that all the guides have been instructing, you need to be awakened here and now.
So if somebody wanted to contact you to set up a session, how would they find you?
Well, the easiest way is to go to my website. One of them is whensoulsawaken.com or Elsen, ELSEN, hypnotherapy.com. And there's all kinds of buttons and, ways to connect to me. And you can get my book there. Amazon has my book too. You can find me there. Contact me there.
And your book's called When Souls Awaken, Real Life Accounts of Past Life and Life Between Lives Regressions.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for giving us your time and coming onto the podcast.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Simon. I really appreciate it.
It's been absolutely fascinating. And that was a great interview with Pieter Elsen. Don't forget, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so through Patreon. If someone signs up to the $2 tier, you'll get a bonus episode every month. And on the $5 tier, you get access to weekly bonus episodes, the occasional extended episodes, and of course, the growing back catalogue. Visit the homepage of my website, pastliveshypnosis.co.uk, and click on the Become a Patron button, or go to patreon.com/pastlivespodcast. The podcast is on YouTube. There's no video, it's just the audio, but that is another way to access the episodes if you want to. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and you can find me at Simon G. Bown. And if you enjoy the podcast, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or via your favourite podcast app to make sure that you don't miss out on any episodes. And thanks for listening.